Okay.
Hello, everybody. Glad to have you with us again. We're back for part 2 of Coding Optional, getting started building blocks quickly. I know I've needed to start thinking about creating blocks and how to make blocks that are maybe not what I already have available to me. I would gauge myself as somewhere between I'm not an entry and I'm definitely not a senior dev. I'm a little bit in between all of that zone. So the faster I can build blocks and get started creating blocks, the better it's going to be. I see that we've got people coming in from all the way from Hawaii to Italy so far and all parts throughout. So that's pretty
Neat.
great. And I think we've got some people in Serbia as well with us today, which is fantastic. With us, we have Alex Standiford. Alex has recently joined GoDaddy Pro, but these sessions have been in planning since even before that time. We're back for part 2. Part 1 will be uploaded and processed soon. Part 1, we covered a lot of high-level concepts about what are blocks and why might we want to use blocks. Today, Alex is going to show us how to get started digging in with that. And then next week, we'll come back for part 3 of the series. And so you'll want to make sure we'll pop some messages here at some links into the chat area. You'll want to come back next week and sign up again for part 3 in this series. So that said, Alex, glad to have you with us today. I'm going to turn it over
Hey,
to
thanks for
you.
having me. Okay. So like she said, my name is Alex. Just a quick introduction. I started WordPress in like 2009, where I built my first WordPress site and just really got into it. Was using it as a user, not as a programmer. Kind of fell in love with programming in general. Switched careers from being a mechanical engineer to a web developer in about 2014. Since then, I'd started a small agency. I still actually do it, but and we do where I've built like dozens and dozens of websites and literally hundreds of WordPress plugins. Um, at this point in my life, I'm now focused mostly on building online courses where I teach other developers and other people how to use WordPress. It's mostly developer focused, but it's been pretty good so far. This one I'm going to talk a lot about how this specific lesson or webinar, I guess, I'm going to talk more about the practical side of this. So last time you were given, I had this slideshow and all this stuff. We're not doing that this time. This time I'm literally just going to open up the WordPress dashboard and I'm just going to walk you through building the pages I presented to you in the last one, at least as much of it as I can. I'm hoping I can get most of it done in 40 minutes, 30 minutes, so that you can kind of see what's going on and give you guys plenty of time to ask questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. One more thing before I forget. I want to mention that after this, I will be hosting just like last time, an after webinar talk on my Discord server at WP Dev Academy. I'm hoping Courtney or somebody can throw a link in the chat for that, but basically it's at community.wpdev.academy. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, expand on some of these things. So if you don't get your question in, or if I happen to go a lot longer than I want and you just didn't have time, come on, pop on over to there. I'll be there and we can answer questions and talk about it from there. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Let's see, go to Firefox. There we go. Okay, you guys should be able to see my screen okay. Just a quick confirmation would be good. Yeah, it looks like you can. Okay, good. So, all right, so what I have here is a bare bones WordPress theme. So we're going to go ahead and look at the theme editor just so you can kind of see what's in here. It's very minimal. I wrote a very small amount of CSS just for some big things that were absolutely necessary for this, but you can see it's very little. And technically, you don't even really have to write this, but for the sake of the presentation, I went ahead and did that. Inside of my themes functions file, you're going to see that I have a few sidebars, which are widget areas, basically, registered. If you're not a programmer and these things don't make sense to you, I'm also going to talk about this in layman's terms as well. But basically, I've registered 4 sidebars here. One is a header, a footer, a blog sidebar, and the landing page header. And if you remember in our talk last time, we talked about how there's this area right here for the header, an area for the footer, an area for the sidebar, and an area for the landing page specific header. And that's exactly what we have right here, where we have the 4 different widget areas. And these are just going to contain a bunch of our blocks, like what we have here. So we have an image block, a navigation menu block, and the blocks down here. Okay, so let me close that because I don't need it. Okay, so from there, we also have a footer file, which is literally just calling the footer sidebar, the footer widget area. We have a header, which has the minimum stuff needed. It has a dynamic sidebar to call the landing page header, as well as the regular header. And actually, I need to add a quick check there where I was using get page template. So we'll just do this real quick. Okay, so that should work. I was hoping that I forgot to do that before I got on. But anyway, this is basically just going to check to see if there's a page template for the header. And if there is, it'll use the landing page. Posts and the index page and all this stuff, it's literally just regular old-fashioned templates. Just nothing really special, really important there. I'm going to go ahead and add, I think if memory serves me correctly, I need to actually make this landing page. It's either .php or just, yeah, it'll be .php. Okay, so anyway, so if we go into widgets, you're going to see here that we have those widget areas. We have header, footer, blog sidebar, landing page header, and then there's another section here for inactive widgets. Now, if you're familiar with the widget area in the past, this looks pretty different. The significant difference is, of course, this can now use any block that you want. So we're going to lean on that and be able to allow and use that to using the blocks like what we talked about here. I did it this way because as of right now, I think this is the best way to go about doing this. In future updates, they are working on more full site editing features that will probably make the need to use widget areas like this less and less important. But at least for the time being, I think this is the way to go. So with that, the theme, like I said, is pretty minimal. Not a lot of stuff here. You're actually going to see whenever we look at the actual site itself, it's very, very bare bones. There's not really a lot going on here in terms of style. That's intentional because I didn't want to muck up the difference between, what is necessary for this and what isn't. Of course, you can take your CSS and you can make this thing look very nice. You can style it to your heart's desire and customize it as you see fit. Along with the actual theme itself, I've actually added some just some dummy data, basically some dummy posts and stuff like that, just to kind of show some content on here, just to make it not look so blank. But you'll see here, there's this blank box at the bottom where the footer goes, and there's absolutely nothing up top where the header is. And on the sidebar, there's no content here, and that's because we haven't actually added any blocks to those areas. So if you remember, we're going to work on this, the header, the sidebar, the footer, and the landing page. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the page and actually start building some of that stuff out. What you're going to find with blocks is you're going to write a lot less code than you're used to writing. And that's just because once you have it all set up, pretty much everything else can be done with the block editor. And if it's not practical to do it with the block editor, then you can just create a custom block to make it so. So let's go ahead and go back to the widgets area. And we're going to build our header area. So we're going to go to the header, and we're going to split this into 2. So we're going to use a columns block. We're going to set that on like 3070 and drop an image in here for the logo on one side. I'm going to just grab one quick from my documents. We'll do this one. And then I'm actually going to place a menu here. So navigation menu. You're going to find that there aren't any created yet, so we have to create some. So I'm going to control click on that, go back to my menu, and we're just going to add a couple of quick and easy pages here. So we're going to click in header menu. This is just like good old-fashioned WordPress. Create a menu, add a landing page, a sample page, and then we'll also add the blog page. That should work. Okay, so if I save the menu and we go back to our widget area and we reload, update real quick. We have to reload because the navigation menu doesn't check every time you click, so you have to actually load the page again. Okay, so now here we can click on header menu. We're going to leave the title blank because we don't actually want to use this. We're going to click update. So now if I go to my site, you're going to see we've got our content here and this image, which is way too big. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll go back over here, click on this. We'll set the size to, we'll set the height to like 200. Actually, I don't have to do it like that. I can just set it to 50%. There we go, or maybe 25. That's probably better. There, save that, reload. There we go. So that's looking a little bit better. Obviously, you know, some padding and some other things would make this look much, much nicer. But from a very simple standpoint, we've effectively built a very, very basic header, right? Using nothing but blocks. Now, I imagine that, I know I do, with at least with the sites that I do, anything that gets a little more complicated than this, I tend to create a custom block for it and just have a header block, and it literally just gets dropped in here. If you're running an agency and you've got a set of headers, you know, header designs that are very common to what you do, it makes a lot of sense to just create a handful of pre-made blocks, which we're going to get into here in just a minute, that you can then just drop in here. I would imagine that, I mean, for me at least, that has saved us a lot of time, because most of the time that I spend building a website is built in building the header and building the footer, really. I mean, the content and all the other pages, they're kind of just design systems. So the header is always the pain in the butt. So if you can standardize that specific piece and make it to where, you know, your designers basically choose from a handful of commonly used header layouts, you're going to be able to save yourself a lot of time in the future without having to use a specific theme that has a header attached to it. You know what I mean? Because instead you just have these blocks and you take them with you wherever you go, and you know, you can apply them to whatever site you want and then modify the styles as you see fit. So there's the header. Let's go ahead and add the footer. We're going to do the same thing as we did last time. So we're going to use the columns block, because if we look back over at our design, we can see there's 1, 2, 3 columns. So we're going to go in here. Thirds. The first column, I will add the logo again. So we're going to grab it from here again. Oh, there it is. Okay. Select it. We'll set the size to 25% again. And then I can actually add another bit of content underneath here and say something like, you know, something like a slogan or something like that, just underneath of there. And then let's say in the middle column, we just want to add another menu. So we'll go over to our menus and we're going to create a new menu. And we'll say footer menu. We can add all kinds of stuff to this. So we'll add some pages, page A, page B, about the test, just all this stuff, right? And you can see this is saved in. And then once we go back to our widgets, we can add a navigation menu, pick the footer menu. And then finally, on this third column, what do we have here? We have a contact block. Okay. Well, it just so happens that I took the time to install Ninja Forms on this plugin on this site. So I actually have access to a forms block right now. So we can say Ninja Form, and we can pick the Contact Me form. And it overflows because Ninja Forms doesn't recognize that there's the possibility for this to be less wide than it is, but it won't look like that on the site. So if we go back to the demo and we reload, we should see something that looks pretty good on the footer. Okay, so that's not half bad. Again, with some styles and some extra work, we could really make this nice. But you can see just from simply building these out, we've got this rough layout done. We've got this rough idea on where the stuff is and where the content is, without writing any code at all. I mean, outside of the initial layout for the theme, which could easily be turned into a boilerplate if you wanted to and just used everywhere. Okay, so now we've got the header, we've got the footer, and if we go over to our blog page, we're going to see that applies here. And the moment of truth, let's see if a landing page changes the template. Nope, it kept them both. I'll have to fix that later. But anyway, so now let's go ahead and add the sidebar. And it's the same process, right? So if I wanted to add an ad, create an ad or something, maybe I couldn't upload an image directly, or maybe you're using an ads plugin, something like that. Not sure. But we'll just go ahead and drop. I happen to have an ad here that I've used in other places. So we'll just drop that in real quick. And there you go. So now you've got this sidebar with this content. You have a header and a footer. Lots of polishing needs to be done to make these things really great, but it's a pretty solid start point. Okay, so now that we've got that set up, let's get into the goods, right? The actual creation of a custom block, right? So we're going to go into the sample page here. I'm sorry, the front page. Let's go to the front page. And we're going to turn this front page into what we have here for the home page. So it's going to have a heading block, some feature blocks. I'm not going to do a carousel block. I'll probably just do an image with some text or something nice here, but because I don't have a carousel block and I don't want to spend too much time on it. And then we'll also do a query block here at the bottom. So if we go into this page here and we click Edit Page, you can, from here, wipe out all this stuff that we don't need, and we can get started. So first things first, we need to add a heading block. So a good one for that is WordPress has a built-in block called the cover block. Now, if you're using like GhostKit or some other system, you could potentially replace the need for this altogether and use some other different block. Maybe you made a custom block or something like that. Who knows? There's all kinds of different things you could do with that. So let's go ahead and check the media library and see. We should have some pretty nice images just built into WordPress from our import. Let's use this one. Okay, so we're going to select that, and you can see it puts it in the background. And maybe we'll say something like, some kind of jargon. Nice copy there. Line it up on the left, and then maybe we'll add a button underneath. So we'll hit enter right here, and you can see we can actually add more blocks inside of this. So we can do buttons. We can literally just add a call to action button here and say, learn more. And click on the button, and we can potentially style it in some way. Maybe we want the color to be a brighter green on black text. So green, something like that. Actually, yeah, the black is definitely better. Okay, so if we update the page and we go over to our site, you're going to see we have this nice big giant heading block. Now, if I had an image that was an appropriate size, it would look much better because this one's a little blurry, as you can see. But you could change that image out with something better. You can actually customize this block to do all kinds of different stuff. You can make it to where it's a fixed background, repeated background, all kinds of different stuff. Even change where it focuses based on the image size. You can set a minimum height of the cover. I like things like 600 pixels. Seems to usually be pretty nice. Not only that, but you can also add an overlay. So if I wanted to dark overlay on this to make it a little easier to read the text. You can even make it a gradient if you want. But point being, this block is one example of something that's built into WordPress core that is actually really nice, and oftentimes covers that heading image that you see that's so trendy several years. And then if it's not your thing, you can always create a custom one. Okay, so next up are these feature blocks. Now I'm actually going to do these without creating a custom block first. And if that works, and after doing that, I'm then going to take that and then turn it into an ACF block so that we can reuse it a little bit easier. So a feature block. So let's think, if we look here on this example, we have 3 columns, right? So we'll first create a columns block. Make it 333. We'll add in our, maybe a heading, then like web development. Maybe we'll add some forum and some text here real quick, just a little bit of text just to hold as a placeholder, just to hold us over, and Word should do it. And then maybe we'll add a button. And that call to action can be, oh, and side note, I'm actually just hitting slash, so I should probably specify that. When I'm adding something new, I just hit the slash button. You can say type slash to choose a block. And I'm just typing the word that I'm looking for to bring it in quickly. If you don't know what it's called, you can always just click the plus underneath and find what you're looking for. But you eventually just get to the point where you just kind of fly through it. Maybe we have a button here like our services or something. On top of that, let's add an image here. Right. Media library, we'll just grab one that we already have. Let's do this one. Okay. All right, so we'll update that. And I could go through and build these other 2 blocks, but you can already see kind of what I'm getting at here. This block, this item here is essentially 4 blocks in one. And if we look back on our design, you recall that we had 3 feature blocks, and then on our landing page, we actually have 6 more of these feature blocks. So it would be really good if this was just a custom block that we could just reuse all over the place. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to convert this over to a feature block. I'm going to use it because I think it's the most common choice. Unfortunately, in order to be able to do this with ACF, you have to have the Pro version instead of the free version. If you don't want to pay for ACF, that's totally understandable. You can achieve what I'm showing you here in very much the same fashion using Lazy Blocks, which is a free WordPress plugin on the site. In fact, the only reason why I opted to go with ACF is because I have a feeling that most of this audience is comfortable, and that's where their context is. So let's go ahead and go over to our plugins, and you're going to see that I already have ACF Pro and set up. So we can actually just get right into it. So I also have a custom block created here. Now, normally you would go into a code editor and actually edit this and build it and all this stuff. I'm actually just going to do it directly in the editor for the sake of this demo. But the reason why I'm creating it as a plugin instead of a theme is because I want to make sure that I can take these blocks with me wherever I go, right? So once I build this, I can keep it, and then whenever I want to reuse it again elsewhere, it's as easy as installing this plugin. Okay, so if we go to open up my notes real quick, because I've got the snippet already copied, and I would rather just use that than go too slow. Actually, I don't have it. Okay, that's fine. So what we're going to do then is we're going to actually inspect, and we're going to look at these set of blocks that we've created. And you can see right here, block column, everything inside of here are the set of blocks that we've actually created. So I'm just going to copy that whole thing because we're going to use that here in a second. And then there's actually a advanced custom field has documentation on their blocks, and it has a really good example in it. So I'm just gonna go grab that snippet real quick. Okay, so if we go to this page, you can see here, here's the snippet. I definitely recommend that you check this post out though. It talks a lot about how ACF blocks work. Really solid, but I'm just mostly here just to grab this chunk of code, which we will talk about whenever I paste it in over here. Okay. So here you can see, basically, this is adding an action to register this block type. And basically, we're just creating a custom block here, but the block we're creating is called feature block. So let's go ahead and call it that. So we're going to replace all the arguments here, name with feature block, title, block, and we'll just name it single featured item, right? Something like that. Now in their example, they're using a render template, which is a template inside of your theme that it just goes to, it calls, and it uses to render this. This is a perfectly fine approach if you want to do this, but I prefer to use their other argument instead, which is called render callback. A little more messy because you end up with a function that it calls to actually render your stuff. But what's nice about doing it this way is it keeps everything inside of this plugin. Rely on your theme having this template file. Just think about this: if you have a customer who you build a custom block for, and you use the render call in the render template, and you call a theme template with it, that block is only going to work if that template file exists. So you have to remember to add those files in every single theme you create from there on out. And it's just not a great experience. So for me, I prefer to use the render callback and add a function here. So we're going to do that. So we're going to say function. Render feature. That should be fine. And I'm just going to tell the render callback to use render feature block. All that right there. Category, we'll say custom icon. That's probably fine. And then here you can just say things like custom, featured, CTA, all kinds of tags. These are actually used by Gutenberg. If you end up doing a search for any of these terms, it'll actually show this block. Same with category. Use custom or something specific to my agency for any block I create under category so that I can just quickly go over to those and grab them if I ever want to do it that way. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that file and go back over to our HTML. And we're going to actually grab the markup inside of here that we use to create these blocks. Now, of course, if you would rather write this HTML manually and do it, without relying on the block editor at all, you can totally do that. That's completely fine. In fact, I do that pretty often myself, but this time around, we are going to do it this way. Okay, so I need all of that, all the stuff inside of the column, because we don't want the column itself, we just want everything else. Okay, so let's go ahead and paste this in as a string. And then we're going to clean this up and get rid of all of the extra stuff and actually use some custom fields with it. So first things first, we need to change this so that instead of saying web development, it says title. So we'll go ahead and actually let me paste it with single quotes. There we go. So we'll go in here and we're going to do something called concatenate, where we combine the results. We're going to say get field. And if you're familiar with working with ACF, this is very much like working with a repeater block or something to that effect. You can just say get field inside of this function, and ACF knows the context and we'll be able to figure it out from there. We'll say get field thing. Here, we're going to replace this source for this image with get field image. Get rid of all this source set and all this stuff. Actually, you could probably just simply do field image and just make it use the whole image itself instead of trying to mess with that markup, because WordPress does a lot of really magical things behind the scenes with images for us, so we want to keep that. This section here is the paragraph text. We don't want that. We want to replace it with our own stuff. We'll say get field text. Then here you can see this is the markup for the button. So we'll do the same thing here. Concatenate, add href, which is so we can add a link. And then we'll actually concatenate get field UTA URL. Then we'll replace this text here with UTA text. There we go. Okay, so we've now created five ACF fields that we're going to need to use and set up inside of the ACF interface. Let's see here, we got an error, one sec. Oh, of course I need a semicolon, my bad. We actually need to echo this. There we go, so echo content, whatever this block is called. There we go. Okay, so I know that was a lot right there, especially if you're not familiar with writing in PHP, that may have seemed a little daunting. But take another look at it, watch it a couple times, it'll start to kind of sink in. Okay, so if we go to custom fields, which is ACF's place for all of their, where you configure and add all of the individual here, right? So we've got all these get field things, but how does ACF actually know what these are? Well, it doesn't right now because we haven't actually added these in a field group. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go back into our field groups. We're going to click add new, and we're going to say featured block. And this right here, this is the part where the big disadvantage of working with ACF or something like this is because of this, you have to remember to import this for every single site you're on, unless you actually import this inside of your plugin directly, which you can totally do. And if I have time, I'll show you how to do that. Let me go back into my plugins, make sure I get my items correct. So custom blocks. So they were heading, image, text. So we'll add those first. So heading, you'll see the field name has to match what we put in the code here. So heading, that can just be text, that's fine. Okay, there's one. Next one is image. So image, we're going to tell it to use an image field. We want it to pass actually, looks like we can't make it render. So I'll just do the image URL. And for the sake of this, we will just do AMG, SRC, image source. Just kind of cheese it for now. But ideally, you would use something like get attachment URL or something like that inside of WordPress. The preview size is fine. All of this, we don't need to mess with any of that. So we'll leave that as it is. Next up, we will go to text. Okay, so text. It would be really nice if we could add bold and italic and stuff like that to this and not just make it regular old text. So this is up to you, but I'm going to use the WYSIWYG editor on this, which is basically the classic editor built into Gutenberg. So this text field can literally use the TinyMCE editor directly for its field. And then finally, we have, and then we also have to do the CTA, which is a URL. So CTA, URL, that'll be a URL. This is all probably very familiar if you've done any work with ACF. And then finally, CTA text. And this will just be the text that you put in. If you're using lazy blocks, it's pretty much the same idea. You're adding fields, You're specifying fields to it inside of the editor, and then you're placing them inside of the template. The only difference is Lazy Blocks actually can use something called Mustache, which is a template engine, and you don't even have to edit it outside of it. It's really cool. But okay, so now we have to add the logic that connects these fields to the block. In order to do that, we have to say, show this field group if block is equal to feature block. And the reason why feature block is visible right here is because in our plugin, we registered this block type right here. Had we not done this, this would not be available here. So it's very important that we register the block, we set up the way to render the block, we add the fields that we're rendering inside of the function, and then we add those fields there inside of this interface, and we connect them to the appropriate block. So update. Now, hopefully, if we did everything right, if we go back into edit page here on our home page, we should now be able to place in another block. So we should be able to say featured item feature block. There it is. Okay, so now you're going to see this is going to work a little differently. If you look over on the side, we can see we have a heading, image, text, all those fields that we added. I can also click on this pencil and edit these directly in line if you prefer to do it that way. So we'll say, right, management, right? We'll add that as a field. Oh, there you go. See, so it added that text directly. We'll add another image. See if this one works. Let's add the unicorn. Why not? Hey, there it is. Okay, great. And then we can add some more lorem text if we wanted. See, this is all tied to this one single block instead of having 4 or 5 different blocks. So this is especially handy if you have a customer who's like really, who gets frustrated with having all these blocks. Like in no situation would they ever want to move this image down here, right? And being able to do that just confuses and frustrates them. This is a great way to handle this because it kind of solidifies things a little bit, but still gives you the ability to customize things. All right, so we'll add a URL and we'll add some text. Something like that. Okay, so now we click update and we view the page. We should see that, good. Okay, there it is. Now the reason why it's taken up all this width is because of the very nature of how WordPress grid works, or WordPress columns work. So I have to add a 3rd column in order for it to tighten up. I think either that or my image is messed up. It's one of those two. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste. Hopefully this will work. Block. Come on. You can do it, WordPress. It's not going to let me, is it? Okay, fine. We'll do it again. Okay. And then we'll just add some more text here. Fine. We'll grab an image real quick. Add some more lorem text. Add another button, link, something like that. Okay, great. Now if we go back over to our page and we reload, you're going to see that my image is totally the problem. So you have to fix that. So just for the sake of speed, I'm just going to grab this image right here, and I'm just going to correct this by changing the markup to match what the other one is. Hoping I'd be able to get away with that, but it doesn't seem like it'll let me. So I'm going to go back into here. This source. There we go. And we'll get rid of the source set because that'll really mess this up because I'm not setting up the source set. Okay, so hopefully that'll fix it. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now we have 3 columns. And then at the bottom, you could add a CTA block or something like that. You could potentially just reuse this image thing up here at the top if you wanted, or something to that effect. It's already been 40 minutes at this point. I was hoping I could get far enough to show you more, but I mean, really, you can kind of see some of the like real big benefits here where it's like, okay, so now we have this one block, right? And you can see it wasn't that difficult to make it. It was just a matter of creating a function to render it and registering a custom block. If we're feeling really fancy, we could go in here. We can check this featured item block and generate the PHP and then copy this code to our clipboard and literally go back into our block plugin. And ideally, this would probably be in a separate file, but you could basically just go right here and paste that code in just verbatim right there. And now that block data is inside of your plugin, so you don't have to remember to add these field groups in this interface right here. Now, the problem with this, the thing that kind of stinks about this is if you change this in the interface, you have to re-export it and add it to your plugin every time. So you have to be mindful of that. But at this point, you've basically created a block that's custom to your needs that you could use not only on this site, but on any other site that you want as well. And all you have to do is make sure you have ACF installed. So that's pretty handy. And then from there, I would then, obviously go in and build the call to action page, the landing page, fix the logic where it's broken right now, where the header, this would be a different header, but it would just use the different widget that's inside of the widget area. Right here, we have the landing page header. And I just had hi right here just to test it. And you could add your own custom header here, and this would only apply on the landing page. Landing pages in this specific example are just a custom WordPress template inside of Pages that is just a blank, simple page. So if you click on Add New, you could see the template. You can click on Landing Page. And this is actually, this part of WordPress right here, the template area is actually changing a lot right now. They're working on making it to where you can create page templates using blocks. So eventually, this whole process will get even easier. I mean, just over time, as they continue to work on this stuff, it's just getting easier and easier to build entire websites with very little code. The intent here is, like I said in the talk, you're not building a website, you're building components that allow you to assemble a website. Now, some of those components are going to come directly from WordPress core. Some of those components might come from some kind of third-party plugin that you've purchased, maybe a free one like Ghost Kit or something like that. Or maybe they're just coming from you directly, where you yourself are building these Something else that I really like to do on these pages is, for example, like I don't want these to be full width, right? I want them to kind of be in the middle here, about a third of the total width. So in my themes, I really like to add these little helper classes like mod, something like mod width medium or something like that. I mean, you see these in CSS frameworks, maybe max width, say 1200 pixels or 900 pixels. We'll do that. And margin auto, right? So with that, you can now go back into your page, this home page here, and you can click on here on this columns area, any block inside of it. And then in order to get up to the columns, you can click on here to select the column, click again to select all of the columns. And you can go in advanced and add an additional CSS class, which matches our mod width medium, right? So if I go in here, I add that, it's going to add that CSS class to those columns. So now, just like that, our images look all nice and beautiful and squished, which is caused by that not being set. But that's CSS for you. Anyway, so now it's not as wide as it was before, and it was because I used this mod class that I just created. Now, if you're using something like GhostKit or some other thing like that, they actually have features where you can actually write the CSS directly in and associate it specifically with this block. So if that's your jam and you want to do that instead, go for it. If you're using, a site builder like Elementor or something like that, that functionality is going to feel very, very familiar to you. And actually, to be honest, GhostKit just makes the block editor feel more like a site editor than it already does. Um, I'm a little ambivalent on using too many things like that because I prefer to just build the stuff myself and have access to it. But everybody's different, and there's nothing wrong with that approach. Okay, so I think that's. I think this is a good time for me to stop and taking questions because I know I just threw a lot of stuff at you guys. So
Hey there. Hey, welcome back. So yeah, that was great. I had not seen anyone previously using the widgets area similar to what we'll see as templates in block-based
yeah,
themes. So that was kind of
right.
fun. For those that are watching, one of the questions I personally had actually for Alex, have you tried assigning the same regions using a block-based theme like header, footer, etc.? Have you tried using a block-based theme and defining them as templates yet?
No, I haven't. I
Okay.
opted to, especially for this, specifically for this talk, I just really wanted
Yeah.
to focus on being like custom
That's
things.
yeah.
But you're right, templates. I mean, I've heard of it. I just haven't really messed with it, to be honest.
Yeah. So stay tuned for more info because the way that Alex was laying up the header and the footer inside the widgets area, it's almost exactly identical to that when you switch over to a block-based theme. And I've been dabbling with a few of the block-based themes. When you're into full site editing mode, you'll see that you can get at the template parts called header, footer, etc. And then it's instead of doing it in widgets, you could do it there. But everything else would be exactly identical, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Questions. I know Alex covered a lot of great info for us. I see a couple questions in there so far. I see one. It seems that it's working great with plugins. Why should I abandon this method and work with native React blocks instead?
Why should I abandon this method and work with native React blocks?
Yeah. So at what
Um,
point do we go from the method you're teaching us today to just get me React and let me code it up in React?
well, to be honest, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that approach. I think it really comes down to who's editing the content. If you want to have to rely on a developer to make changes to how that stuff's laid out and how that stuff works, um, then by all means, go for it. But if you want to hire a WordPress expert who's not necessarily a developer, who can handle these layouts and take care of a lot of that stuff for you, then the block-based method I think is better. And this is coming from a guy who's built, I mean, headless, nearly headless, you name it, I've done it. And they all have their pros and cons. So, I mean, if you want to do it that way and it makes more sense for your team to go that way, by all means, do it. Because what's interesting is even the block editor, it'll actually let you, on the API, it just renders the HTML output anyway. So you can you could potentially do it that way. I've actually done things where I've taken blocks and I've actually set it up to where the block data is served up via a REST API endpoint, and then created my React components to actually detect what block is what and use React components instead of writing it directly inside of PHP. So if you wanted to do like a headless approach where you still have that control from the blocks, I mean, you can totally do that, and it's super cool when you do.
It sounds like a lot of fun to dig into. I'm still a React novice at best. Um, I'm mediocre with JavaScript, we'll say that. So lots to learn and improve upon yet. Another question that came in, if somebody would like to dig in more, you started showing us PHP. We will put the replay up as quickly as we can, and you can go back and go over that information. Where would you suggest for folks to learn if we've got somebody that doesn't know PHP yet, but they know ACF enough, they can function with that? Where would you send them to learn the parts of the plugin editor that you were typing? How would they pick up a little more PHP there?
Well, there's a couple of different places. I mean, obviously, WPW Academy. I mean, I'm making courses on there all the time. That stuff is a little more geared toward advanced development, so it's probably not a very beginner-friendly resource. As for actual just learning the basics of, I would suggest just learning the basics of PHP. You can go with Larrycast. Larrycast is actually where I learned. I learned it from Jeffrey Way before he was still in NetTuts at the time, but he was a pretty good resource for me. But to be honest, I mean, a lot of the PHP stuff that I showed there is, I mean, it's basics. So if you took a basics PHP course, or you found one on Udemy or Codecademy or something like that, I mean, honestly, you're going to be fine, because this isn't. I mean, you saw everything I wrote was copy paste. I literally copy and pasted stuff from documentation, or it was generated for me.
No, good. Anybody else? Any other questions that you have for Alex so far? I know that was a lot of info. This was the part that I was taking my students through a year ago when I was teaching at a boot camp about hooking up blocks with ACF. And by the way, that is something that I see commonly listed on job descriptions, is like, you need to know how to do ACF and some of the basics of blocks. That's good. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we can expect for part 3 coming up?
Yeah, sure. So I haven't completely decided yet. I've been kind of running these a little bit on the fly as I build them. I'm like, okay, well, based on the last one, it makes sense to do this. Based on this one, it makes sense to do this. I'm probably going to get into more actually building a block, like literally just building one with code from scratch. It's going to be a lot more code heavy than this one is. My hope is to set it up to where we can actually build a header block, the header as a simple header block. I'm probably going to write a lot of that beforehand and just kind of walk through, kind of like what I did today, and just show the key components that make up doing that, because otherwise this will be a 4-hour long session. So, but you know, I'll definitely this actual theme, the theme that I just built here, I haven't, but I intend to upload it or put it on GitHub or get it somewhere, so that if you want to look at this and tinker with this directly, you can do so. And I intend to do the same thing with the block-based one as well. Sorry for not having that in time, but I didn't even think about it until like 10 minutes before. I was like, man, people might want this.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure that they will. And in fact, if you do publish that, we can include it with the recap. I could send a recap email along with the video. So that'll be great.
Okay.
So before we close out for today, this is still the month of October. Hard to believe that we're this far along. It feels kind of like spring weather outside of my house. It's very not end of October weather here. But that said, we are getting websites ready. We have holidays coming up, and we're running entire series on our GoDaddy Pro events around getting your websites ready for the holiday rush. Our next event is also coming up on that one for October 27th on getting your sites ready for holiday traffic. That's close to, I think we have 2 more parts yet in that series as well. So if you've got e-commerce happening on your website, if you need to make sure that that site is going to stay active, live, and you get the most out of it with all the holiday sales coming up, do make sure that you sign up for that as well. William, for the recording, if you check back for the exact link that you used today to sign up for this event, the video will be published there. And because Alex has some code that we could share out, I can actually send an email response when we've got both that and the video to let everyone that has attended know that we've got those resources. So you'll get it for sure. Thank you so much for joining us. Do feel free to come back again next week. Like I said, part 3, sign up. And Alex, tell us again where we could go after today wraps up if people want to keep talking with you.
Yeah, sure. So if you go to community.wpdev.academy, I'm actually going to be there for a little bit. Last time we kind of went in there and Courtney and I just kind of chit-chat a little bit, and people asked questions. Yeah, so we're going to do something. I'm going to do something to that effect. I don't know if Courtney's going to be there or not, but we'll be there. We'll be hanging out. And you're welcome to join and ask any other questions if you have any more.
Thank you all so much. See you again next week.